Hey everybody, is State Senator Mallory McMorrow. Welcome to This Week with Mallory, the live stream that we do just about every single week that the Senate is in session. Let's go ahead and get into it. Hey everybody. Welcome to anybody who is joining us for the very first time. This is a live stream that we host across Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And it's an opportunity to connect with me to get an update happening in the state, on the local level, and for live Q&A. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you do have a question, we utilize the chat feature, the comment section of whatever platform you're on. So if you're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, doesn't matter. Go ahead and type in your question or comment in the comment section, but please make sure to include your name if that is not immediately obvious by your screen name, what city you live in, and then go ahead and fire away with your question. We will try to get to as many as we can. This week, I have this coffee mug with a bunch of rescue dogs on it that I really enjoy. So lots of news to get into. So we'll get into it right away and sharing my screen with you. We change things up a little bit in terms of where things are on my desk. So bear with me while we get it all sorted. First up in vaccine news updates, the FDA and the Center for Disease Control are reviewing and authorizing more booster shots for more people. And I will say a couple of weeks ago, I popped into Walgreens to pick a few things up and saw a lot of people taking advantage of the booster shots that were available. So certain people who received Pfizer vaccinations months ago were already eligible for boosters through the CDC. And now the CDC says that Moderna and J&J recipients qualify as well. And if you've been following the news, you may have seen that they have reviewed and authorized kind of mixing and matching as well. So one of the ways that I think about this, because people are like, what's the best combination? What should I do? This is kind of the first vaccine where, to my knowledge, and in my experience, anybody has really known what brand or manufacturers there is. Like, think about the flu shot. When you go in to get the flu shot, it's just the flu shot. You're not necessarily asking for a specific brand. But what this says is that, mixing and matching is okay and is safe. There are still some restrictions on qualify when for a booster, because obviously it's still an issue. So starting 6 months past the last Pfizer or Moderna vaccination, people are urged to get a booster if they are 65 or older, nursing home residents, or at least 50 and with an increased risk of severe disease because underlying health conditions. Boosters are also allowed, but not necessarily urged for adults of any age with increased risk of infection because of underlying health conditions or, a job where you may be interacting with a lot of people or living conditions. This includes healthcare workers, teachers, people working in correctional facilities or jails, or living in correctional facilities or jails, or homeless shelters. Moderna's booster will come at half of the dose of the original 2 shots. And as for recipients of the single dose J&J vaccine, a COVID-19 booster is recommended for everyone at least 2 months after the vaccination. And I know a lot of people went after J&J because one and done was a really great way to go for a lot of people. But I think when we've seen sort of efficacy studies, that comes in a little bit lower than the 2 mRNA vaccines. So in listening to CDC just this week, they recommended with anybody for J&J, go ahead and get a booster and you will up your protection level so that we can keep getting back to normal, which is where we all want to be. All right, let me move on to our next Big news story. This was a news story locally that also made national news. Here in Royal Oak, there is a resident who owns four African caracal cats, which I think a lot of people in Royal Oak now know about and maybe didn't necessarily before. So these cats have gotten out a number of times, and we received a lot of concern from residents last week when two of the cats got out. This was the fourth or fifth time that cats had gotten away from their owner, and it really required a lot of resources for the community. A local nearby elementary school canceled recess to keep kids inside. The Royal Oak Police Department was kind of out in full force, and there was an animal welfare group that came to help rescue cats and kind of get them back under control. And I know there's been a debate about this, a lot of discussion. So what is clear to me, and I made a post about this, is there are some pretty glaring holes in our animal policy on the state, county, and local level, because the owner of these cats did nothing wrong on the legal level. But as we kind of look at, especially in a densely populated suburb where you live very, very close to your neighbors, and this is true of any pet owner, you are ultimately responsible for your pets. And, it's that balance, right, of kind of what we want to do as individuals and then what the impact on the larger community is. So I know Commissioner Brandon Colo also serves on the Detroit Zoo board. So I know he was in regular contact while these cats were out and about with animal welfare experts just about what these cats are like. These are exotic animals. This isn't your typical house cat. And they require extra care and attention. And it's something that does take a lot of resources. So we will be talking with state departments, local officials on kind of what we can do from our policy standpoint to really make sure we're explicitly clear and that our policies are safe, not only for the animals themselves, but for our communities. And we're really respecting that balance. So I know a lot of people reached out to us and were concerned. So we wanted to share that update as well. I know the latest was the city of Royal Oak approached the owner because we do have nuisance policies on the books and really mentioned, especially given that this has happened a number of times, that the owner would be fined, but offered her the opportunity to take them out of the city. And it's an ongoing story, but really from my perspective, we have to look into these policies and make sure that they are clear and that they're in the best interest of all of our residents and the animals themselves. Next news story. This was pretty cool. The United States Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, visited Rochester Community Schools this week and was at Rochester High to speak with a student class regarding equity in the workforce, equity and inclusion in the workforce. So really, really proud day. Go Falcons for being a part of that conversation. And I tweeted this out, but I know every time I talk to any of our young people, I am always so blown away with how passionate they are, and just if these are the kids who are going to be the ones who are leading us into the future, we are in very good hands. And I'm sure Secretary Walsh was as impressed as I always am. So that was a proud moment. Also made a few additional stops while he was here in Rochester at Caring Steps. Secretary Walsh toured where he listened to workers, parents, and staff. And Superintendent Shaner, Dr. Shaner, talked about the web of issues that have caused the labor shortage. We see this especially in education and in the care economy, in childcare and early childhood education, and in education. We are seeing teachers leaving because these are incredibly challenging and taxing jobs that are essential to our communities. We're seeing a record number of people, particularly women, leaving the workforce. And that is something that absolutely have really to unlock, a significant force as we kind of look at the labor shortage and make sure that it is a system that works for everybody. So thank you to Secretary Walsh for coming to Michigan, coming to our community, and connecting with everybody. All right. Updates from the Capitol before we jump into kind of some news things. Bear with me while I find my mouse here. All right. Some of the bills this week, it was a pretty light agenda overall, but a few things that I wanted to highlight for you. First up is the Mental Health Jail Diversion Program. This week, bill sponsored by Senator Stephanie Chang and Senator Rick Outman, grant for community crisis and jail intervention to address concerns in our mental health response programs. And that passed overwhelmingly. This was a bipartisan bill package. And I know Senator Chang has been working on this for a while. And I think especially in the wake of protests and outcries over the past year, I think fundamentally we know that times police officers, if they're the first to respond to a situation, are not necessarily equipped to deal with somebody who is having a mental health crisis. So that's something that we recognize on both sides of the aisle, and a real step to provide communities more resources to address that and hopefully keep people out of jail who need mental health support, and make sure that we are sending the appropriate professional to respond and really recognize where somebody is having an issue before they end up in our jail system. So part of the bills, Senate Bill 637 would provide grants to establish and expand community crisis response programs across the state to empower community crisis responder clinicians or responder peers to de-escalate, stabilize, and reduce emergency situations involving somebody who is suffering from a mental and that was something that I was proud to support, and really grateful to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle for working on this important issue. So another big news story that we want to share is I have been in the legislature for almost 3 years. I took office in 2019. I've introduced over 35 bills on a wide range of issues. But this week was the first committee hearing ever on a bill that I have sponsored. So I want to show the video from the committee hearing and then talk a little bit. Chair Runstead, Vice Chairs Nesbitt and Chang, thank you for allowing us to testify today in support of our bills, Senate Bill 153 and 154. My bill 154 is very simple. It would modify the Tax Act to include, quote, feminine hygiene products in the list of items that are exempt from sales tax. These are products purchased by over half of the population of the state of Michigan. That's over 5 million people on a regular basis, significant portion of their lifetimes. And while it may seem like an item, the cumulative cost over a lifetime does add up. And it's simply a tax that one half of our population has to pay that the other half does not. As it stands, 13 other states and the District of Columbia have already eliminated the sales and use tax of such products, and Michigan would do well to follow suit. Step towards tax fairness. And I would like to thank the chair and our colleagues for your consideration and encourage support of these bills. Chair Runstead. One of these days, we will figure out how to get videos to stop playing a second time. Really simple. I mean, these are bills that I have introduced in office that would simply add feminine hygiene products, menstrual hygiene products like tampons, pads, cups to the list of items in the state of Michigan that are exempt from sales tax. Senator Brink's bill in the package would from use tax. So super simple, very straightforward. I heard my explanation there, and I posted about this on Twitter, and a woman responded really kind of criticizing and saying, how could this possibly have taken 3 years? You know, this sounds like a lot of political language to talk about working with stakeholders and the amount of work to go into something that is so simple. And she is fundamentally right. And something that I have learned in my short time in this position is that sometimes things do take years, that you have patience. Senator Brinks has been working on this issue for, I believe, 8 years. So since her time in the House, has been working to introduce these bills, gather support. It's not just introducing a piece of legislation. It is reaching out, building stakeholders, building connect with, colleagues of yours who may not necessarily see this not as not understanding the issue, but maybe it's not the most important thing on the agenda, or maybe it's something that, doesn't necessarily align with where committee chairs are prioritizing what is on the agenda for the year. So we'll continue to work on these. This is a bipartisan package. There are equivalent bills in the House that have been sponsored by both a Republican and a Democrat. And you may have seen in the video, Rep. Posthumus was sitting between Senator Brinks and I, who is a Republican House rep, who has the equivalent bill. We hope, and I'm very a full vote on the Senate floor and send these bills to the governor's desk and get it done for all of the residents of the state of Michigan. So that was some pretty exciting news for us to share. Something that we're going to drop in the comments or send out is there was an interview on Michigan radio that started running today. So you may hear it on NPR, WDET if you live here in Metro Detroit, Michigan radio if you're mid-Michigan, or across Michigan public radio stations. The auto no law that passed in 2019. Seen week after week after week at the state capitol, people who have been catastrophically injured in car accidents, along with their caregivers and their families, coming to Lansing to say how devastating this legislation already out for them. It cuts percent by 45%. And the way the law is being interpreted is that it is retroactive. So anybody who was previously catastrophically injured, rather than being grandfathered into a system that we have all been paying for, are losing. I have talked to families who catastrophically injured loved one, and you are their full-time caretaker at home. Our auto no fault system has provided, nothing that you're going to get wealthy on, but enough to get by and make ends meet if you are somebody who has had a job, take care of a loved one full time, and families are scared and devastated that they're going to lose everything and they don't know what to do. So this was an interview really just to ask how we got here, because this was bipartisan legislation in 2019 that was signed by the governor. And I offered a little bit of, I want to say, I don't think anybody with any malice. I think everybody had good intentions, but the process of when things are rushed, we received the bill. I serve on the Insurance and Banking Committee in the Senate. We received this bill, at 8:00 at night, the night before an emergent 8 a.m. hearing was called to run the entire bill. It was over 80 pages long in the first draft. I went through the entire thing late into the evening. When I got it, I had 28 questions lined up for the hearing the following day, and I was allowed to ask one. So, kind of in general, if something is rushed through, there's typically a reason why, and it's really hard to see how it's playing out right now. We do have an opportunity to fix it. There is legislation that has been introduced to not undo the bulk of the legislation, but to fix, some of the pieces so that we do not see, particularly those who are already catastrophically injured, suffering and losing the care that they have relied on. And I hope those pass. We haven't seen any support from Majority Leader Shirkey or Chairwoman Tice, who chairs the Insurance and Banking Committee. But if this is something that is a concern to you, please email them, please contact them and say that you want the fixed legislation to go through. This is something I voted against the no-fault reform law in 2019. But that doesn't mean I don't want to fix it, right? It's something where you sort of see how it's playing out, and it is, I would say, worse than I thought it might be. But we do have an opportunity to fix it, and I think that is our responsibility as legislators. We're going to do a little bit of a pivot into something lighter and better news. Getting into good news, my favorite segment of our live streams. First up, Troy High tennis team won the state championship. This is awesome. We consistently have athletes in our district winning state championships, and it's awesome. So congratulations to the Troy tennis team, seen here hoisting that trophy very high in the air. Congratulations. We're really proud to see you out there and doing that. The Colts secured the Division I title before the final round even began and ultimately topped the field with 30 points to earn their first championship. So congrats to everybody on the team and coaches and parents and friends. We know there's a lot of people who are involved in any of these successes for our athletes. Next up in good news, if you are a family member who has a kid in any of our Oakland schools, the Oakland County system reported 0 new COVID last week. While cases have been low in recent weeks, this is a standout number for the second most populated county in Michigan. And I know there has been a lot of media attention given to school board meetings, to county meetings regarding mask mandates, things like that. But this is a great example of very basic safety measures work. And it is everybody's goal. It is my goal to make sure that not only are we back to our normal lives, but we can stay there. I think the worst thing is if we out in cases, especially as we're waiting for vaccine to kids, to our children, that there are basic things that we can do to ensure we know, 18, 19 months into this pandemic, how to go about our lives safely. And this is great success for all of our schools. And it just shows that, basic, very easy measures work. Lastly, as we are in spooky season and getting close to Halloween, we wanted to share something that is seasonal and really exciting out of Royal Oak. A Royal Oak horror author is going to release a book of short stories and poetry. Local author and Royal Oak resident has released a new collection of short stories and poetry titled Absolute Garbage, Total Nonsense, and Utter Ridiculousness. He says, despite the title, the words within are intended to provoke thought and conversation, as well as squeeze a laugh or two out of readers. The book includes stories about a man in a cross-country relationship who realizes that he has an invisible studio audience watching and reacting to everything that he does. And an agent of Cupid who uses deadly force to bring a boy and a girl together, and twin sisters who find a strange piece of equipment that may be the instrument in their father's ongoing death. A lot of mysteries, fun stories involved there. Also includes poetry about love lost and found, unrequited feelings, renewal of affection, reconnection with family, and angels with nefarious and clandestine motives. And if that is not enough, all packed into one book, I don't know what is. All right. So with that, we are going to jump out, and it is now time for our live Q&A section. So I am going to bring on our Director of Constituent Services and District Outreach, Liz, who is coming to us live from Lansing. Liz, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm sharing my new version, our new title. I was not hired in for graphics, but I try my best.
All right.
Yeah.
What do we got in questions this week?
All right. I am only seeing one question right now, and it's from Joseph on Facebook. They ask, are different state higher education funding levels based on student enrollment at their respective universities?
Are different state higher education funding levels based on student enrollment? So, great question. Rereading it to understand it a little bit. So, I'm assuming this is funding levels within the state of Michigan. And it's not as clear cut as enrollment numbers. There has been long going debate about equalizing funding for higher ed. When you kind of look at the schools that are across our state, between University of Michigan, OU, Wayne State. Wayne State receives some of the lowest state funding. U of M receives higher state funding. And there's not a clear-cut formula for that. And actually, in the budget that we passed this year, the increase overall for higher ed funding, and there is a constant debate about how we allocate funding, where it goes. So short answer is no. Longer answer is we are happy to kind of pull the history of funding if that's of interest. And, I would say pay attention. It is a constant debate. And one thing that we do, in my role and our district. So I am continually advocating university for Oakland Community College to make sure that we receive our fair share of funding for students, young people going back to school to have opportunities right here at home.
All right, and that's the only question that we have this week. Nothing from our submit your question form, but maybe next week.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. Last call for questions if you have anything. Otherwise, we do have our submit your question form. We know that Friday at 1 p.m. is not a great time for everybody. But if you do have a question that you want us to answer on a future live stream, feel free to submit it and share these and watch them anytime. And Liz, what are now that I feel like we just jumped from like very late summer into almost winter. It's cold out today. So what are your plans for the weekend?
Yeah, we are taking our dock out of my grandma's cottage up north. So fully into the winter and fall season. No more boat
Yeah.
rides.
It's that time where, it's not a fun task, but you just gotta prep to hunker down.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. We're going to let Liz go. Everybody else, I hope you have a very safe weekend. Next week will be our last live stream for Halloween. So be prepared for some surprises, and we will see you next week.